Chapter 1. The Burden of Routine. The alarm shattered the fragile stillness of my world, a jarring screech that dragged me from the uneasy limbo of sleep. I opened my eyes to the dim, flickering light of Outpost Solace, my breath immediately visible in the frigid air. The cold was omnipresent, a merciless companion that seeped into my bones, refusing to be ignored. The thin insulation of the station offered just enough reprieve to keep me alive, miserably alive. I swung my legs over the edge of the cot, the metal frame groaning beneath me. The chill of the floor bit through the soles of my boots as I stood, my body aching from another restless night. The itch on my cheek flared to life, as if it had been waiting for me to wake. I rubbed at it absently, knowing the effort was futile. It was always there, a constant reminder of this place's cruelty. The air quality check was my first task, as it always was. The console screen blinked weakly to life after a series of sharp taps, the aging circuitry reluctant to comply. Oxygen levels were passable, though only barely. The recycler, a relic of a better-funded past, wheezed along, its filters well beyond their intended lifespan. I logged the numbers, the pen dragging across the page with a deliberate slowness. My hands trembled from the cold, the ink pooling unevenly with each stroke. Next came the rig diagnostics. The drilling rig, a towering behemoth of failing metal and groaning hydraulics, was as temperamental as the rest of the outpost. I activated its interface, watching as the screen filled with a familiar array of fluctuating data. For a moment, the readings held steady. Then came the spike, a sudden surge in pressure that defied explanation. It was a pattern I had come to dread, and today was no exception. With a sigh that fogged the air in front of me, I reached for the thermal suit. The fabric was stiff with age, its patches barely holding against the wear of repeated use. It was never enough to keep the cold at bay. It merely dulled its edge, leaving just enough discomfort to remind me that warmth was a luxury long lost. The corridors were narrow, their walls streaked with frost and streaks of rust that had long since become part of the station's character. Each step echoed unnervingly, as though the sound itself were trying to escape this place. The pipes lining the walls hissed occasionally, bursts of vapor escaping from unseen leaks. The moisture formed delicate, crystalline patterns that mocked me with their beauty, as if this frozen hell had any right to create something so intricate. In the maintenance bay, the rig's control panel awaited me with its usual defiance. The readings were chaotic, the data flickering between the absurd and the plausible. I removed a panel, exposing the tangled mess of wires within. My fingers, stiff from the cold, worked clumsily to isolate the fault. As I worked, my breath fogged the air, mingling with the faint steam that leaked from the machinery. Then I saw it, the frost. It wasn't like the ordinary patches of ice that formed everywhere in the outpost. This was deliberate, almost geometric, tracing intricate patterns along the interior casing. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart thudding in my chest. It shouldn't have been there. This section was insulated, protected from the freezing temperatures outside. I hesitated before reaching out, my gloved finger brushing against the crystalline formations. They didn't melt. I pulled my hand back quickly, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. The rig's systems needed stabilizing, and I couldn't afford to let my imagination wander. After what felt like an eternity of adjustments and recalibrations, the equipment settled into a tenuous stability. It was a fragile victory, and it tasted hollow. Returning to the control room, I was greeted by the ever-present static of the radio. It filled the air like a ghost, its hiss and crackle a cruel imitation of life. But today there was something new beneath the noise, a rhythm. Faint and fleeting, it pulsed like a heartbeat buried under layers of interference. I leaned closer, my gloved hands trembling as I adjusted the dials. For a moment, the pattern became almost clear, a melody teasing the edges of recognition. Then it was gone, swallowed back into the chaos. The itch burned fiercely now, a maddening pulse that demanded my attention. I clawed at my cheek with desperate frustration, the glove scraping against raw skin. The relief was fleeting, the itch always returning, relentless in its torment. My gaze drifted to the console where the rig's readings continued their ceaseless scroll. I froze. The anomaly had returned, but this time it was different. The data suggested something impossible, something vast and moving beneath the ice. Depth sensors maxed out, energy levels spiked into absurdity. The numbers defied reason, yet they felt deliberate, intentional. The silence around me grew heavier, oppressive in its totality. It wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a presence, filling every corner of the room with an unspoken weight. My hand hovered over the intercom, an instinctive gesture, though I knew there would be no answer. "Outpost Solace reporting," I said into the two-way radio, my voice cracking under the strain. "Pressure anomalies persist at the drilling site. Possible system fault or unknown interference. Additional analysis required." I released the button, waiting for the usual reply that never came. The silence after my transmission was heavier than the static itself, an emptiness that mocked my hope for contact. With a resigned sigh, I turned to the logbook and recorded the same report by hand, the pen dragging sluggishly across the page in the cold. It was a ritual as futile as the radio call, but it was something to hold on to, a tether to the semblance of routine. I lingered for a moment, staring at the console as if it might offer answers. The two-way radio remained silent, unyielding, the static mocking my efforts to reach anyone beyond this frozen void. I turned away, the weight of my isolation heavier than ever. Tomorrow I would inspect the rig again. Tomorrow I might find answers, or perhaps the answers would find me first.